Welcome back to Conversation Corner. This is a project of Ono Academic College and the Jerusalem Post. We're focused on a series of webinars to discuss the day after the Israel-Hamas war and the October 7th Hamas massacre, in which 1,200 Israelis were murdered and several hundred Israelis were taken captive. I have with me here today Pamela Peresky, who is an advisor for NYU Mindful Education Lab and a senior fellow at Network Contagion Research Institute. Welcome, Pamela.
Thank you.
I also have with me today Chiron Sharabi, who is the brother of Eli and Yossi, who were October 7th victims. Yossi is an Ono, or was an Ono alumni. Welcome, Chiron. And I'll also have with me soon Professor Shlomo Noy, the president of Ono Academic College and the former director of the Rehabilitation Hospital at Sheba Medical Center. So I think to get started in a conversation about trauma, which is the topic of today's webinar, we need to be reminded of the situation in which Israelis are living today. So I want to start with Chiron, whose brothers, as I mentioned, Eli and Yossi, were kidnapped by Hamas terrorists on October 7th. Since then, Yossi, who was an alumni of Ono Academic College, was found dead. Eli remains in captivity. Chiron, please start out by taking 10 minutes and sharing your story.
I want to share you the story of my families. I have two brothers, Eli and Yossi, that live in Kibbutz Be'eri. In October 7, the terrorists came to Kibbutz Be'eri, and it was taken Eli to Gaza. They kidnapped Eli Gaza. The terrorists murdered his wife Lian and two daughters, Noya and Yael. Noya and Yael is only 16 years old and 13 years old, and they were murdered by the Hamas terrorists. I have another brother, Yossi. Yossi is only 53 years old. He was taken to Gaza by the Hamas also. His wife, Nira, and three daughters survived the horrors. The terrorists took them to sit on the grass of the kibbutz and took Yossi with the Ophir Engel and Amit Shani to Gaza. Amit and Ophir were released by the Hamas, and Yossi stayed there and in the captivity. 3 weeks ago, we heard that Yossi was murdered by the Hamas terrorists in a captivity. It's very terrible, tragic for the family. And we know that Yossi make many efforts to be released from the captivity. But we know it's very dangerous. It's a fighting area for him and for all the hostages. Eli is still in captivity, and we hope that one day, as soon as possible, he will release too.
Amazing.
My family is broken, shattered from the tragic history of, and I will hope that all the people that support in peace all the world. Pray for the releases of hostages and make efforts to bring them home. I want to thanks for all the people in Israel and in the world too that support in a terrible time in Israel, and all the time strive to make peace in all the world. And Israel is striving strive to peace all the world. And we know that the good things is better, or it's raised compared to bad things. This is my family story. We lost 4 people from my family. We hope that Eli will back home as soon as possible.
Thank you. That's what I can say. Thank you so much for sharing what happened to you and to your family. Unfortunately, we know that your story is less unique than it should be in the state of Israel, and that there were hundreds of people who were taken hostage, some of them released in mid-November during a exchange that we had, or a deal that we made with Hamas. Another more than 30, like your brother Yossi, who have been announced dead by Hamas, killed by Hamas in Gaza, and still another 100 who we are hopeful are alive. Just this week, we found out that the IDF was able to rescue 2 hostages that were in Rafah, which is an amazing feat for our army. And we can only hope that your brother and others will come out the same way in the very near future. So our soldiers are continuing to fight against Hamas. The war is not ending. Pamela, I want to turn to you. You've been in the field and covering this, some of these stories for Psychology Today and for others. Talk to me about what you've seen.
I need more support from the public. I'm concerned that people will forget the hostages. The struggle to free the hostages helps me to deal with the trauma. The government has to be ready to pay a high prices to bring the hostages home.
So Pamela, also if you could react to what Chiron just said and to what you have seen as you've been covering this war.
I have to say, hearing Chiron tell that story, I talked to a lot of people, and like you said, the stories are, they're much too common, and they're heartbreaking every time. I guess 2 things really stand out, including something that Chiron said, where even as he was telling the story, he was moved to say that the good things in life are more important than the bad things. This is something that I hear over and over. The negative, the heartbreaking, the word that he used was shattering. I hear that word a lot. I'll say a little bit of something about that and then get back to the positive. But there isn't really an adequate word in the psychological lexicon for what happened on October 7th, or for the ongoing experience of Israelis or even Jews around the world. This is a unique moment, thankfully unique moment in history since the Holocaust, but a horrible one. And I've heard from people at all degrees of separation from the attacks that they describe both an overwhelming sense of shock and loss and a sort of surreal quality to life after October 7th. this was another genocide attempted against Jews. And the fact that so many were injured or killed or kidnapped has created a ripple effect from those who were attacked and unable to fight back to those who came to defend them, to the rest of those in Israel who watched helplessly, and to Jews around the world, many of whom, regardless of whether they had friends or family in Israel, came to realize for the first time, I know I did, how much their sense of safety and security in their own countries was tied to knowing that Israel existed. So even though we use the word trauma for these experiences, we talk about extreme trauma and complex trauma and collective trauma. The word doesn't really seem entirely sufficient. I think there's a quality, to use the word that Chiron used, it's a kind of a shattering, and that's just not conveyed by the word trauma. So for now, the word we have in our toolkit is trauma, but I'll be interested to see whether something new emerges. And then the other thing that I noticed that I started to say is that in almost every interview I've done, there's a kind of resolve to not allow terrorists to rob people of their joy for life, to not allow them to take any more than what they've already taken. There's just a really firm determination to cherish life and live life to its fullest.
Professor Shlomo Noy is also here with us. And as you mentioned, you're not only the president of Ono Academic College, but you are the former director of the Rehabilitation Hospital at Sheba Medical Center. When we talk about individuals and a nation in trauma, what are we talking about? I mean, do you align with what Pam just said? Are we a nation in trauma? And if so, what does that really mean?
I believe that, I was for 25 years the director of the rehabilitation hospital at Sheba, and I've experienced many soldiers and civilians being rehabilitated after, the last 25 years. Think how many army operation and war operation we underwent in Israel. But I think that this event of October 7 is totally different if we talk about trauma. In Israel, there is a lot of experience in individual treatment. We have 50 years, unfortunately, of trauma concepts and therapies since Yom Kippur War, 50 years ago, and Lebanon 1 and Lebanon 2. And we created the protocol for many other countries in the world about individual approach to trauma and post-trauma. But this horrible day and what happened later basically changes the whole concept of therapy of trauma. Because first of all, the numbers. We will not be, and no other nation in the world will be able to treat individually so many trauma victims. It's just impossible. So we need to think about other setups which we did not experience yet in order to challenge it, in order to be exposed to level 1 of trauma and level 2, and then the families and the relatives which did not experience direct threatening of life, but are experiencing the trauma of their relatives and so on and so forth. So first thing, the setups that we knew are not relevant. Second, we need to think about group therapy in other settings. And third, we need to think about community approach. In the world, and if we started to look into the literature and experience of other countries, there is very little literature and experience about community approach. Let's say that we want to do a community intervention in kibbutz A or kibbutz B. That's a big change. And which we did, and we at Ono, we want in our trauma center to do it. We want to go and reach out the communities at their places and many people together. We did it in the hotels in the Dead Sea, but again, we encounter 70 people at the lobby of the hotel on day one. A week later, these 70 went to other hotels or went to other places, and you meet another 70. This is not the setup of therapy that we are used to. Totally different.
I just want to ask you on that. You mentioned the academic program that you are working on a new center that opened that is focusing not only on identifying trauma, but mapping it, intervening, and moderating it in this new way, within this new era. Tell me if you can go a little bit in that direction about what is the program actually doing. And I mean, I hate to ask this, but isn't it a little too late? Didn't we need to know how to do this before October 7th?
So maybe I'll tell you in a nutshell. We, as an academic institute, we think about our role in the trauma center a little bit different. First of all, level one is the academics experience, the awards that we give, the degrees. And we already now, in February 24, we started the 2 programs of art therapy and מדעי ההתנהגות in two degrees. We insert and we put a specialization in trauma, already done in this. We are an academic institute. We are dealing with degrees. We are dealing with academic studies. In October, we are offering all our degrees, 25 courses from health professional education, art therapy, and what have you in Ono. We offer them 25 courses in trauma specialization. So each faculty that want to put 5 to 6, 7 courses in the usual degree, which the Malag, the high committee allows us up to 15% of the degree, we will be inserting it in the coming academic year of 24, in October 24. This is 2 things which is part of our academic challenge. Third, we do lots of, I would call it training. For example, we have 1,200 teachers which are learning 2nd degree in education. They will not become a therapist, but we need to give them some tools, some toolbox, how to deal with the children that they are teaching, which are in trauma or post-trauma. So we need to give also, which we call it in Hebrew, Ne'eman Chosen, which means he can handle, he's not a therapist, but at least he can handle the crisis and another attitude to those students which he teaches, and they are in trauma. So this is level 1. Level 2 is clinical intervention, like in any other model. Our health professional students are treating communication disorder and occupational therapy and sport therapy and nursing. So in the same model of academic training, academic clinical sites, what we call, we are starting a clinic at Ono in the campus, but also what we called Clinica Nosat, a traveling clinic, which will do reaching out, as I said before, to the kibbutzim, to Sderot, to Ofakim, there with a bus that will be basically a therapy bus, so to speak. So this is 2nd level. The 3rd level is research. What we wanted to do is research about assessment of services that we are doing in our vision. Last word, we are looking for partnership. We are partnering with Ichilov, with Shiba, with Natal, with Amotat Achim L'Chaim, which gives scholarship to soldiers which are injured. We are giving scholarship to injured soldiers for the whole 4 years of the degree, not for 1 year, together with Amotot. So we did not invent the wheel, as we say. We are looking for partnership with many, many other organizations.
Thank you. I mean, it's actually fabulous and phenomenal and very important, I think, for both Chiron and for anybody who's listening to this to see that we're being now proactive and trying to make the changes that will be necessary to keep our community healthy. Pamela, I want to move back to you for a moment. In your reporting, have you observed other or similar innovative approaches or interventions that are being used to address some of the psychological effects of what's happened here? Are there any lessons that our viewers could learn from those experiences?
One of the things that's most apparent is that there's a tremendous collective commitment to helping people put the pieces of their lives back together and move forward without being broken. What I just heard about Ono College is wonderful to hear. I'll be really interested to see the results of the teacher trainings and the mobile clinic and the research and everything that they're doing. And I know actually that that program focuses on positive psychology and art therapy, as you just said, but also play. And those things are going to be really important. Along those lines, in other with other people I've spoken to, I met an artist and art therapy named Inbal Schmelzer, who's been doing some amazing workshops with soldiers and other people. There's a Center for Mind-Body Medicine, which offers programs that include self-care skills for people who are directly affected, but also for therapists to prevent burnout. And the center trains people to create healing communities, something that, the idea of a community approach keeps coming up. I also met a former Navy SEAL commander named Yotam Dagan, who was a unit psychologist and chief instructor, and he created a protocol for PTSD called DUGRI. It's both for treating and preventing PTSD, and he now has taken that protocol and created a peer-to-peer program that uses an app to facilitate structured conversations for healing. And then there's also the Mifrasim Institute for Psychotherapy Research and Training, which integrates theory, research, and practice, and not only offers a psychology degree through the Academic College of Tel Aviv, but they also train existing psychologists and psychotherapists to deal with extreme and complex trauma. And after October 7th, they created a program that includes educators, just like the one we just heard about for Ono College, so that teachers and teaching assistants and especially kindergarten assistants, which I understand is like a half-day responsibility, that they can most effectively help affected children. And they're also doing trainings for government employees who need to interact with displaced Israelis. So, everything I hear here, I expect that the world will learn and benefit from whatever psychological best practices are developed here.
Incredible. Sharon, I want to turn back to you for a moment. What do you need yourself to deal with the trauma that you're experiencing?
I reminded first that I need all the supporting of everybody to stand with us, any square, any junction, to shut for all the leaders, all the who gets all the decisions, the real decisions to bring all the hostages home and to make a big influence for them, to make all, to release them, and to pay any price to save them, because for them the time is running out, and we can't give up for them, for their life. It's our committed to save them, and we hope that we will succeed in this mission. Okay.
Sharon, let me ask you a question. You are day to day dealing with the fact that you have lost a brother and that a brother is still in Gaza. Does fighting for the release, does being a part of the community, that word that keeps coming up, does that help you to get through the day? Is that part of what having these others around you allows you to keep fighting and saying, that we must get their release? How do you do it?
we are very afraid and concerned about Ellie's destiny. And we cannot manage our lives normally while he's in Gaza. We are worried about who will tell him that his wife and daughters and brothers were murdered in Gaza. It's a very terrible story for them. It's very terrible, tragic. We don't know how a person could cope with such tragic news. And we're hopeful that Ellie will stand and we can hug him and support him for the new life of him. And it's caused me to continue the fighting for his life.
So I want each of you to have a chance to share some final thoughts on this Ono Conversation Corner, with this focus on trauma that Pamela has already said is maybe not even the right word for what we're discussing. So Pamela, you've actually written a lot about anti-Semitism and democracy, and you talk a lot about human rights and justice. How does this tie into October 7th and the way that we handle the results of these events, thereafter?
To that probably has to do with going beyond resilience to the concept of anti-fragility. So like going beyond bouncing back to becoming stronger at the broken places. People call this post-traumatic growth. Historically, that's what Jews have generally done, but we're also in a strange moment at which our refusal to be victimized turns us into an oppressor in the critical imagination. And that's sort of what we're seeing on college campuses. I think that may be a large part of why there's such widespread demonization and delegitimization of Israel, and why Israel is subject to the double standard, to use Natan Sharansky's 3Ds. Israel is precisely where Jews are strongest after anti-Semites try to break us. And in the critical social justice paradigm, that strength and the ability to overcome being victimized is not tolerated. So this is like one of the aspects of anti-Semitism. The other aspect is that anti-Semitism requires a kind of suspension of critical thinking. Unfortunately, that's exactly what the illiberal, anti-democratic dominant narrative on American college campuses does. It replaces critical thinking with critical theories that rely on a set of moral and logical inversions and on seeing the world in terms of us and them, in terms of oppressors and victims. And whenever we're in a moment in which people predominantly see the world in terms of us and them, Jews become them. And that's where we are. It's also it requires moral inversions to sort of like in the world in which speech is violence, then rape can be considered resistance. In a world in which every campus has an anonymous reporting system for microaggressions, which are considered offensive enough to warrant reporting, but daily chants of globalize the intifada are not seen as threatening. So that's where we are. And it's only in that world where the target of an actual avowed genocidal attack can be accused of genocide for defending itself. That's, I think, to put those things together. And as far as democracy goes, Jews thrive in a liberal pluralist democracy, and where Jews thrive, everyone thrives. And where anti-Semitism rises, liberalism and tolerance decline, which is not just bad for Jews, that's bad for everyone. And I guess, people always talk about Jews being the canary in the coal mine, but I think we are also the bulwark for civilization against barbarism. And that's sort of the moment where we see ourselves right now.
Thank you. Professor Noy, let's close it up. What's next? I mean, Pamela mentioned the school at Tel Aviv University that's working on trauma. Will there be other programs like yours at Ono popping up? How will Israel survive and thrive once again while we're still blanketed in so much trauma?
As for the future, our vision is that we are creating this trauma center because we believe, unfortunately, that this is, and really unfortunately, this is not the last trauma that we will experience here in Israel. We think that we need to prepare ourselves to many, unfortunately, trauma to come. It can be not necessarily a war, it can be an earthquake, it can be a war, it can be other divisional crisis in the Israeli society. There is already a trauma between society and Israel. Ono is a multicultural campus. We have Haredim, we have Arabs, we have Israelis, Jews. We have all the faces and all the sectors of the Israeli society are in Ono campus. And we need also to do something for the future. We need to think how to lower the trauma of our internal society in Israel. Some of the Arabs are afraid to come to work. Some of the Jews are afraid from Arabs. We, as a multicultural one, we experienced it in our campuses in Jerusalem, in Haifa, and so on. So we need to think about a trauma center that is sustainable and is challenging future crises and has the ability, which we think we have in students and faculty in Ono, to challenge it in a very professional way. And doing so, the most important thing is doing it with other organizations in the Israeli society.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Professor Noy, Pamela, and certainly Chiron for sharing your story and for being with us today. God willing, when we meet again, we will have no hostages left in Gaza and the war will be over. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.